One of the things that we just heard about soil health, we've heard the definition from Wayne, and that was really nice to set the stage for what we're going to talk about here today. But let's continue that conversation. And Joseph, with leading the efforts in the Cornell Soil Health Lab, this question's for you. Can you tell us more about key indicators of soil health, just in general, benchmarking by soil type, or whether it's rural or urban environments? What kind of other parameters would be important, in general in your region?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I think I'm going to start with a little bit of history from the soil health program and lab. They've been at this for a long time and have helped kind of inform some of the efforts. A lot of the Soil Health Institute samples went through the Cornell group. But basically in the early 2000s, some soil physicists, ecologists, plant pathologists, horticulturists got together to come up with a way to assess soil more holistically, because farmers and extension folks were realizing that standard nutrient tests weren't getting the whole picture, and that a soil could still be sick, but could have great optimal pH, optimal nutrients, but could be poorly functioning, have poor crop yields. So they really wanted to try to get at some of these physical and biological measures to understand more holistically what was going on in the soil, because you can have optimal pH and optimal nutrients, but you can have compaction, low organic matter, poor infiltration, erosion, and a lot of those other resource concerns. So currently with the Cornell Soil Health Test, we are measuring 4 physical, 4 biological, and then a suite of standard chemical tests. And the physical ones are similar ones that other folks are looking at, are available water capacity, aggregate stability, a soil's resilience to holding up to wetting and the strong impact of rainfall droplets, and also surface and subsurface compaction. For the biological, we assess soil organic matter, soil organic carbon, and then some more sensitive biological indicators like active carbon, soil protein, and soil respiration. And the chemistry is similar, so I won't talk about that. But basically, it's really important to understand the inherent properties below that to be able to assess the effects of management on soil health. So we've been doing a lot of work, because I think an amazing, the most simple advance we could make right now is have all nutrient labs across the country just interpret organic matter, because a lot of those labs are doing that already, but that information is not routinely interpreted. So I think that's what a lot of our work is about with soil health assessment right now. And one thing that's really fun in New York State, we have a really great diversity of cropping systems across the state. We have dairy, annual grain, we got small scale organic vegetable farms, we have processing vegetable farms, we have orchards, vineyards. So there's a great diversity across the state. And then there's obviously urban, which I am not an expert in, but I'll talk about the other ones. And we're starting to also do some benchmarking by soil type and cropping system, where we can basically say, how does Jim's a dairy farmer on a silt loam soil, how does that compare to other dairy farms on silt loam soil? So that's something we're excited about doing right now. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, well, Joseph, I think you already answered my follow-up question. I was going to ask you a question from the audience about organic matter and soil organic carbon, and is that the most important factor? But from what you're saying, it sounds like there's a whole suite of factors that we should be looking at, whether they're biological or chemical or also physical. So I don't know if you had any follow-up on that you wanted to mention on, if there are other tests that you think are important, or why that emphasis on organic matter is always so critical.
Yeah, I think organic matter and soil organic carbon are what I would call kind of keystone soil health indicators, but they don't show the whole picture. So in New York State, for example, we have a lot of dairy farms, a lot of heavy equipment running across the field, potentially when fields are a little bit too wet to spread manure and harvest corn silage. So you could have a soil with high organic matter, but some serious compaction issues. So it's important to look holistically for sure.
Well, Joshua, let's shift gears a little bit into soil health in urban areas. I can think of all sorts of potential, soil disturbances that could exist in an urban environment. But maybe just talk about what you're looking at in terms of disturbances and what types of parameters are you looking for to assess soil health in these urban environments.
Uh, Thank you, Tim. Soils in many cities, although they're very small percentage of the area of the city, but they play more and more important roles in the city's urban sustainability and the long-term resiliency. It's a very important resource, and many people recognize that now. And it's actually where most of the taxpayers live, right? So, but very unfortunately, because of the human disturbances, as we all know, urban soils are often, very low quality and very often have some levels of contamination when you compare the soils to the soils from countryside. Front and center, the most important, most widespread contaminant in urban soils is lead. It is mostly a legacy pollutant. It's a historical pollutant from mostly from our usage of leaded gasoline and leaded paint, or from industrial activities. So if you're near a major congested road, or if you have old building, old infrastructure, you are most likely to have some levels of lead in your soil. If you're in an old industrial site or live close to it, you can often find high lead levels as well. So in this case here, screening for lead is really a priority you should do. If you're doing any sorts of gardening or farming in the city, especially in the inner city, in the older parts of the city, there are other type of contaminants in soil, but much less common. It's not as serious as lead. Urban soils also commonly have some sort of artifacts. These are, human-made. These are all human transported materials. Some examples include construction debris, the coal ash, and they are very common. You can find in urban soils. These materials can compromise the soil health. In addition to all these, urban soils are often found to be compacted, so with low infiltration rates, they often lack of nutrients, and they often have high pH. This is because they, often have some sort of concrete materials, which is very common in cities, and these concretes are made of calcium carbonate primarily.
And Sally, I want you to weigh in here as well, but maybe even zoom out a little bit. If somebody says, boy, those contaminants sound bad, and pH and poor infiltration, that doesn't sound very good, but I'm not kind of using the soil to grow my food on. It's just kind of like, underneath foot. So why should I care about soil health in urban environments? Maybe you could start there, and then if you want to add anything onto, what Joshua was just talking about, that'd be great as well.
I tend to be more proactive and less worried than Josh. So I have to qualify my response with that. Josh talked about degraded urban soils, and he talked about contaminants in urban soils. I want to point out also that there's a colleague that we share, Peter Groffman, who talked about urban grasslands, the great expanses of urban grasslands or lawns. And in fact, many gardens in urban areas are very well maintained with excessive care, and you can find extraordinarily healthy soils in urban areas. When you're talking about urban green space, you're starting to recognize in the literature all of the health benefits associated with being around nature and being in a beautiful environment. A recent paper showed that crime goes down if you take derelict lots and bring them back to life. Another thing that happens when you take derelict soils and bring them back to life, and here organic matter addition is a great way to do that, is you reduce the threat associated with soil lead, because that is primarily eating the dirt. And whether you have a little kid that's sitting eating the dirt directly or it's windblown dust, you'll have a much harder time for a little kid to dig to China or get that dust in his house if it's a well-vegetated area. And that's my addition there.
Wow, that's so interesting. I'm learning so much already. So thank you for that. Sally, you've also connected the rural and urban environments with your work in municipal waste. And so should we dive into that topic a little bit? Because we're also Tim and I are very curious about that as far as increasing the organic matter, like you're talking in some of these areas to grow grasses or gardens.
So your trash is my treasure. And that goes from my shopping at Goodwill to my tending my soil. And long before we had centralized waste collection and treatment, it was well understood on an international level that organics that were no longer suitable for us to eat or were the byproducts of us eating, namely night soil, could really enrich your soil. Recent studies have pretty much backed that up 100%. There's a study I cite all the time from the early 1980s about the benefits of organic matter from waste for soil physical properties. And now we've seen a lot of studies showing the very high rates of carbon sequestration. So I work a lot with what you flush. You're going to hear about this from other people on different regional panels, but that's municipal biosolids. Clean Water Act in 72 greatly increased the amounts of that and also encouraged land application. Back in the day, most of the cities that were making these biosolids didn't quite get that you could take this brown, smelly, gloppy stuff and turn it into something that a local home gardener would want to use. And so agricultural use was the primary way that biosolids were beneficially used, that and land restoration. And farmers got it. They were used to hog manure, and the human manure, the treated human waste, smelled great in comparison. Now more and more cities across the US are making products that are very lovely to look at, lovely to stick your hand in, that are based on biosolids. You're also starting to see diversion of things like food scraps from landfills. Both beneficial use of biosolids and composting of food scraps have enormous carbon benefits just from landfill diversion. And they're also excellent tools for soil health. And we're seeing this on agricultural lands. You'll hear more about this. And I know it myself from my own garden.
Well, that is exciting. I mean, this to me is one of the biggest, challenges I see out there is this nutrient cycle. Is how do we get back the nutrients back to the soil from these urban environments? Do you have a sense, Sally, of the scale that this is happening on currently, as far as how are we doing, as a country in terms of repurposing these nutrients back for soils?
I unfortunately have to say that to date, I have a lot of job security. We're not doing a great job with this. We are using about 50 to 60% of our municipal biosolids. That leaves a lot of nitrogen, a lot of phosphorus, a lot of fixed carbon left to be captured in terms of food scraps. We're starting to see states do landfill bans of organics. California was the big one. My own Washington state is following suit. But how do we get that into a behavior change and getting people to put the banana and not the plastic wrap in the food scrap bin? And how do we get compost use to be more accepted on a larger scale? NRCS is starting a program to subsidize some farmers for using composts for soil health and biochars. So we got a lot of work to do here, but it works so well.
Oh, that's great. So Joshua, I think we're going to come back to you because I want to touch a little bit too on those metals that you're talking about. And, it sounds like biosolids are a great solution. Are there other approaches like phytoremediation or using plants to help build soil health in those areas or reduce some of those metals that are in those soils that are relics?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I have to echo what Sally was saying. I think incorporating organic amendments, compost and biosolids, this is a great way to reduce the risk. It's one way to remediate the soil, especially for lead. The compost material can help bind the lead and reduce the uptake to the plants. And the compost can also improve the soil aggregation, improve moisture retention, reduce the dust and spread of the soil particles in the air. So this is a great thing to do. a new study have found that the splash or deposition of the suspended soil particles are actually the biggest contributor of lead actually in vegetables. So you want to use the organic amendments. And phytoremediation, speaking of phytoremediation, it is a great concept, I have to say, and it's very attractive to many people, as long as it works. But I think based on what I know, published studies have consistently shown that the effectiveness is very limited, especially in urban areas. Plants just do not uptake a lot of lead. And there's no plant species that can be called hyperaccumulator for lead. And if you want to do something about it, you might need to treat the soil first before you do any work or any phytoremediation, any phyto extraction. If you're expecting plants to suck up the lead from soil to clean up the soil, you're going to get disappointed, especially in urban areas. On the other hand, some plants do have the ability to stabilize lead in the soil. That's a different approach. That could be a very effective way to reduce the risk from soil lead. But I think we don't know enough at this point. There's more research needs to be done on that.
And what about, and not plants, but what about microbes, some sort of like microbial remediation, or does the microbiome of the soil really impact its ability to be remediated?
I think that's a great question, and it's also a fascinating topic to discuss. Microbes, especially in those in the rhizosphere, as the areas close to the roots, these are very important factors that controls all the biogeochemical reactions. And I think it's very important for the phytostabilization of lead. There's some studies show that. And phytoremediation of some other contaminants, especially the organic contaminants, they can be very critical. There's also some interest in called a mycoremediation. It's using of fungus. It's mushrooms that we all know. There's some efforts on that. I think you can find a lot of these case studies in literature, but some of them worked, some didn't. I think it's a work in progress, in my view. Again, come back to these remediation approaches. I think the most important, most cost-effective approaches for remediation in urban areas, especially for urban agriculture, urban gardening, in my opinion, is still the use of organic amendments and build raised beds if you can.
Great, thank you. I just got a notification. We only have 2 minutes left for this panel. This time is flying by. so with that 2 minutes, I think it'd be great to give you each an opportunity if there's anything that we missed, which I'm sure there is a plethora of things we've missed. But Josh, was there anything that we missed that you really want to make a point of today in this panel, panel related to urban environments or agriculture environments and soil health?
I think the most important thing is that don't be scared about gardening in cities, even though soil is a little bit contaminated by lead or other contaminants. I think if you get your soil screened, if you do the right thing, you should be able to manage the contamination problem. I have to echo with Sally saying that the benefits of gardening is far outweighs the risks. So go for it.
Great. And Joseph, anything you want to add from
Yeah, just from an extension perspective, I think farmers need to be centered in all this work. And I think the most powerful extension and outreach tool time and time again is a farmer panel. And that always rates really high on evaluations. And I think it's a really fun way to integrate an academic and also the real stories and management practices on the farm that are really exciting, that inspires all our work.
Great, thank you. I think most people know I love farmer panels. So, and then Sally, what else are you thinking that we missed that you want to add to the discussion?
In an urban context, common sense. Don't ignore your common sense. So wash your vegetables before you eat them. Wash your hands before you eat. Little things like mulch. It's a great way to keep weeds down, and it also keeps dust down and reduces the potential for contact. So echoing otherwise what Josh said, he was spot on. And thanks.